Brothers and sisters, this is one of the parables that we only find in the Gospel of Luke. And some of those parables are absolute masterpieces. This, perhaps, the greatest of them all. A parable that not only speaks to us of the great work of the gospel, but helping us to understand it from something so intimate, something so close to our hearts, the relationship of a father to his son, of a parent to a child, and of broken or deeply harmed, wounded relationships that are restored. We've all experienced this in our life in different ways. But this parable, like many of the others, summarizes the whole gospel, the whole good news, the whole work of reconciliation that St. Paul spoke about in the second reading today, his ministry being a ministry of reconciliation. And I guess for us priests, we continue to carry that out in the sacrament of confession and in the ministry of preaching. All the gospel is contained in this beautiful story of these two sons. Because it really is, we call it the story of the prodigal son so often, but really it is about the two sons and the father. All three of these characters are absolutely important and very essential to understanding this whole parable and the meaning of it for us. Because perhaps some of us don't feel that we identify with the younger son, but more with the older son. And maybe at times, especially for those who are parents, you have experienced the heart of the father in the story today as well. But it's good to see that the older son himself suffers in a sense from the same problem that the younger son suffers from. He just reacts in a different way. You see, both of them, it seems, don't understand the father's love for them, right? The father has to say to him, to the older son, clearly at the end of the gospel, "My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours." His son should understand that already, but he doesn't. He's trying to make that clear to him. Whereas the younger son, the prodigal, the one that runs away and wastes all of his inheritance, he should already understand that too, as the father has given him everything that he asked for. He gives that to him. What he does with it is not what the father wanted, but he does give that to him. And he, of course, as he is starving to death in a distant country, in a famine, he says, well, at least the people that work for my father have full stomachs. So he certainly is not going to take me back, but maybe I can work for him. So he prepares a speech to kind of try to fix things as best as he can and acquire a job from his father, thinking that's certainly all that my father could ever want of me at this point. That's the only way he's ever going to relate to me again. And so Jesus is trying to share with all of his listeners, with all of us, whether we are like that younger son or the older, he's trying to share with us this deep awareness of the fact that the Father loves you so much that you cannot get your mind wrapped around it. Jesus is already sort of fast forwarding in his mind. He's already seeing ahead of time the cross. And he's trying to help people to understand the immense love, the great extent that God will go to in order to show his love for his people. How deeply he is in love, and how he will do whatever it takes to restore this relationship, to bring about this ministry of reconciliation. But at the time, the younger son and the older son don't see that. What they see is perhaps what we can often see in our own fallen nature when we look at God. We tend to see God in the perspective of how we would be if we were God. From our own fallen nature, from our own weak hearts, our own selfishness, we paint this picture of God where God is a taskmaster. God is interested in sort of how we are behaving and keeping track and keeping record of everything that we are doing. And he's going to measure out his amount of love or his amount of forgiveness based on how we do those things. The younger son comes from one side of reacting to that impossible thing that is put before him by saying, I'm never going to do this. And the shame that he feels about himself, how he starts to sort of hate himself so much, or this attempt at being someone that he feels he cannot be, that he says, I'm done with it. I'm going to just totally put it all completely behind me and run away from it all. That's the younger son. The older son, faced with the same bad picture of what God is constantly striving, working, gritting his teeth so hard, trying to live up to this standard that he has put in his own heart in order to earn God's love, in order to earn his Father's love. And perhaps being very frustrated with himself and even more frustrated with his younger brother, especially after he comes back and seems to be treated so well. But both of them are operating under that mistaken understanding of their father's heart. They think that the only way to get his love is to do all of these things, to check all of these boxes, to carry out all these practices, and then my father's going to love me. That's what's operating for both of them. But the reality is that he already does love them unconditionally. Unconditionally. There are no conditions, no strings attached, no requirements beforehand. Just like your parents loving you as a baby, completely helpless, noisy, cranky, whiny, cantankerous, smelly, etc. They don't love you because of all the great things you're giving them. Even us fallen human beings. And yet, it's hard for us as we grow up to look at God that way, to say, wow, if we human creatures can love this in these little ways, cannot God love greater? Cannot God love more perfectly? They feel that in order for them to get that access to the Father's heart, they have to fulfill some kind of list of requirements. And then they'll be able to receive that Father's love. But it's getting it totally backwards, brothers and sisters, because the only way we are going to be able to walk in God's ways, the only way we're going to be able to fulfill what God really does desire for us, which is to be saints, which is to live a life of holiness, the only way for us to do that is to first receive and dwell in that abundant love that God has for us. If we let ourselves be loved and receive that unconditional love that God is trying to pour into our hearts from his open side on the cross, if we start there, then the rest of it will flow. Perhaps, hopefully, for the younger son who runs away and comes back, hopefully what his father has done to him this day has finally opened his heart to that truth, has finally changed the way of his mind to be able to live first and foremost, from that identity as a son, because the Father has made it clear to him, there is nothing you can do to lose your sonship. Even when this son told his father, I wish that you were dead so I could have your stuff, so please just give it to me now. And he leaves with all that stuff. Even after that, the father says, you're still my son. The finest robe, the ring, and the sandal were signs of that identity as a son. He says, my son was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and was found. Our identity, brothers and sisters, is so important for us to truly live the Christian life. If we think that we are only servants and we are under a harsh taskmaster, we'll never get there. But if we remember that the Father says to us, everything that I have is yours, you have constant access to my heart, there is nothing you need to do to get access to my heart, to this intimacy that I want to share with you. If we operate from that first, that truth, then the rest of it can flow. But it's really important for us, just one thing to emphasize is the importance of a life of prayer and real intimacy with the Lord and being really vulnerable with him. If God is going to transform our hearts, we have to show him our hearts. The Father says, you have total access to my heart as a son, no matter what. But we have to give him the same access to our heart. And if we don't really share and open up our hearts to God the Father, he is so patient and he is so kind that he will not force himself on us. He will only draw as close as we let him. So don't be afraid of sharing everything with him. This one who would take all the pain upon himself in order to set you free, even though we deserved it and not him. Don't be afraid to give him that access to your heart. And finally, this Tuesday at the parish at 7 o'clock, we have the penance service where we are able to allow this story to become our story once again. For us as fallen human beings who have in some way or another run away from our Father, able to come back to him through the ministry of reconciliation that the priest offers in confession, to hear the Father say, you are still mine. I still choose you as my own. So I encourage you to avail yourself of the sacrament of confession on Tuesday night. There will be many priests here. If you want to get in line and go to one that you've never seen before and hope to never see again, go right ahead, that's fine. Actually, I don't know how that works. I know there's like all kinds of people directing traffic and stuff. But there will be lots of priests available. And if you can't make it Tuesday night, there will be similar opportunities at other parishes. Or here, we do confession a lot at the parish, and we'd be happy to help you with that. So allow the story of the prodigal son to enter into your own heart in a deep way about those important truths of the fact that the Father loves you first. Receive that love, and then you can begin to respond in love and follow his will, especially giving him access to your heart, because he has shared everything of his heart with you.